As has been said, my name is Jeff Gaulin. I'm the Vice President of Communications for CAPP, and I think our organization has been well outlined. We do represent, we're the trade industry association that represents about 90% of all the oil and gas produced, from large multinational companies to much smaller entrepreneurial Alberta-based organizations. And I'm proud to speak to you today about Canada's oil and gas industry. You know, in my role at CAPP here, I have the opportunity to speak quite frequently all across the country. And if there's one thing that I'm seeing more and more of, it's Canadians becoming more interested in our oil and gas industry. And at the same point, in getting more involved in the discussion of our energy future as a country. So I hope to further that discussion with you today and talk about three topics. First, I'd like to talk about the competitive advantages that we have and the challenges that we face as a country. As I'll emphasize, these are not just challenges for Western Canada. These are challenges for all of Canada. Second, I'll speak about a critical policy choice that we can make as Canadians, one that we can make as a country, and that is about the urgent need to build energy infrastructure to get our products to more markets and more customers. And third and finally, I'll share with you a vision of what I believe is possible to create a stronger, more sustainable oil and gas industry for the long-term benefit of Canada and of all Canadians. Now, for those of you who are already strong supporters of the industry, thank you. I hope what I have to say today will help to equip you to become more involved in conversations. Now, for those of you who support our industry, but maybe with some conditions, thank you. Thank you for lending your ear. I hope what I have to say today may inspire you to learn more about our industry. And at the very least, I hope that everyone who walks out of this room today comes away with a greater understanding and appreciation of the role oil and gas plays in the Canadian economy and why it matters. And let me tell you, oil and gas does matter in Canada. From the time we wake up in the morning to brush our teeth, to the time that we put in the soap in the dishwasher at the end of the night and go to bed, oil and gas is enhancing the quality of life of every Canadian, whether you drive or not. And oil and gas matters in this country because of the abundant resources that we have. Our energy resources are among the greatest volume of any country in the world. Canada has the third largest amount of oil in the world, 90% of it, 97% of it in the oil sands. We're the fifth largest producer of natural gas in the world. We're the second largest resource of uranium, second largest resource of hydroelectricity. So it's not just on fossil fuels. Canada is an energy-rich country. And oil and gas matters in another way. Because here in Canada, our resources come with resourcefulness. We have a highly skilled workforce. We operate under strict environmental and safety standards. We have a strong voluntary record of investment in environmental technology, and I'll have more to say on that later. And we're among the leading energy producing countries in the world when it comes to human rights, the rule of law, and Aboriginal rights. Finally, oil and gas matters in Canada because the development of our resource energizes our economy. Thanks to the energy sector, we enjoy one of the highest standards of living anywhere in the world. In 2014, the oil and gas industry was and still remains the largest private capital investor in the economy. In 2014, we injected $81 billion of private capital into the economy. And in return, that generated $17 billion in government revenues all across the country, not just in Alberta. That's revenue and money used to pay for school, for roads, for libraries, for infrastructure, for hospitals, for senior care, all across Canada. And we know that when oil and gas companies spend money to grow their operations, when they invest in capital, those are dollars that get reinvested back in the communities and economies such as yours to employ businesses and create jobs. Now today, there are more than 2,400 businesses across Canada outside of Alberta that do business with the oil sands. That makes the oil sands not an Alberta story. It is a Canadian story. Now, when we stop to think about it, it's hard to imagine the development of Canada's economy without the development of our natural resources. For many years, the development of these resources was exactly and inextricably linked to our country's prosperity. And yet we compete in a very highly competitive world. And today, our ability to maintain our competitive edge, our ability to attract investment, to create prosperity, is at risk. Now, in the next few minutes, I'd like to talk about some of the competitive challenges that we face as an industry that affect our country's prosperity, not only today, but also in the foreseeable future. In the last year and a half, we have seen a tremendous amount of disruption in the world energy markets. Outside North America, demand for oil and gas, predominantly driven by China, but other emerging countries, is slowing down. That's having a tremendous impact on demand. Yet at the same time, in OPEC countries and in Russia, we're seeing record high levels of production of oil and gas. So low or slowing demand, tremendously high supply, what do you think's happened to price? We've seen a tremendous crash in the price of oil. Furthermore to this, we're seeing more supply come on. In Iran, sanctions have been lifted in a country that has not been supplying the world markets with its oil. Will, before the end of this year, be supplying more than 1 million new barrels of oil into an already oversupplied market. In Mexico, which has privately been a privately held or government-run oil and gas economy, is now opening up its industry to private investment. It is competing with Canada to attract private capital to invest its resources and get its oil to American refinery and American market. It is in direct competition with Canada. In short, competition around the world is intensifying. Now, closer to home, changes in the United States market has created an even greater competitive threat to our country's oil and gas industry. Now, for many years, we've sold our oil and natural gas almost exclusively to one customer. That is a great customer, the United States. But this customer today is now our #1 competitor. In the last decade, technological advances in horizontal drilling, multi-stage hydraulic fracturing from multi-well pads has revolutionized the energy sector in the United States. From 2008 to 2014, the volume of oil produced in the United States grew by 3.7 million barrels per day. That growth alone is equal to all the oil we make in Canada. And the increase is now making the United States the fastest growth of oil production in the world. On top of that, earlier this year, the United States Congress lifted a 40-year-old ban on exporting American oil. So now, for the first time since Richard Nixon was president, the United States is exporting oil offshore. As I said again, our #1 customer is now our #1 competitor. At the same time, when we look at natural gas, it's the very same story. Production growth in natural gas in the United States is up. The growth has gone from 500 million cubic feet, or half BCF per day, to 15.5 BCF per day, a 15 billion cubic feet per day growth during this time period. Again, that is equivalent to all the natural gas we produce in Canada. So what does that mean today? Ontario, 2/3 of the natural gas consumed in Ontario comes from the United States. 2/3 of the natural gas in Ontario comes from the United States, and this natural gas supply from America is expected to continue to grow and continue to put competitive pressure on supplying Canadians with Canadian energy. The result is simple. Our #1 customer needs less of what we're selling. Before the end of this decade, the United States, which is our only customer for natural gas, will not need to buy any of it from us. So it has been a wonderful run to have one customer. But even my 11-year-old daughter who runs a lemonade stand every summer knows the only thing better than having one customer is having two. So, our energy world is being disruptive, and Canada is feeling the pain. What's been the impact? Well, reading the headlines today, it's not hard to see what's going on. None of us can ignore the impact of lower oil and gas prices. Over the last year and a half, we've seen a precipitous drop in the price of oil. It's a little up today, around $37. But it has fallen something like 65% in the last year and a half. And how have energy companies responded? You've seen this in your community. They've cut back operations, they've cut back capital. So far, we have experienced a drop of 110,000 jobs directly or indirectly related to our industry. That is 1 in 5 jobs, or 20% of the jobs generated by the oil and gas industry in Canada. And we're not done. Last year, we saw the drop in capital. Again, I said right off the top, we're the largest private capital investor industry in the country. Last year, we dropped our capital spending by $33 billion. What's that mean? That's larger than the second largest sector, the utilities sector, spends at all on capital. So imagine that. Imagine not a single dime in Canada spent on power plants, wastewater treatment facilities, transmission lines. That's what it would be like. That's what it would be equivalent to the utility sector to take out $33 billion. And revenues are down. Revenues were down last year 40%. That's $60 billion. Well, what's it like to take out $60 billion of revenue from an industry? Well, imagine no more forestry industry anywhere in Canada. No aerospace industry, no mining industry. It's equivalent to taking out 75% of Canada's automotive manufacturing industry. It doesn't matter how you measure it. The impact is huge. And with dropping revenues, billions of government dollars of revenue generated from our industry are at risk. These are losses that will impact every Canadian household, from the public services that our communities receive to the taxes or deficits that our communities will have to bear. The Bank of Canada's governor, Stephen Pallaz, recently said that the fall in the drop of oil prices has had an unambiguously negative impact on the Canadian economy. And he's right. Unemployment claims in Alberta are up 100% year over year. WestJet has canceled 6 daily flights between Calgary and Edmonton and is moving planes out of Western Canada. Moncton used to have 14 charter flights a week to bring folks from Atlantic Canada to work in the oil patch in Alberta. 14 a week. Today, it has none. That is 3,000 Atlantic Canadians who used to work in our communities to support their families at home, who don't anymore. So Canadians of all walks of life in all industries all across the country are certainly feeling the impact and the force of these dramatic changes in our industry. So what's to be done? Well, let me offer a suggestion. First and foremost, Canada needs to find more customers. We have the energy the world needs. Our challenge is getting it there. As a country, we have no influence over the world price of oil. You know, for all our abundance of riches, we produce less than 4% of daily market share. So while we don't have impact on world prices, we do have an impact on policy choices. And at the top of this list in this country, we need to make smart choices on energy infrastructure. And here's why. Today, in part because of constrained pipeline capacity, Canadian oil and gas sells at a discount to our #1 customer. As I've said, virtually all of our oil and gas exports go to the United States, and it pays less for Canadian oil than it buys other oil. At the same time, as I've said, the US has quickly become our #1 competitor and growing its supplies of oil and gas and production. And this year, as we've continued to experience, is increasing its exports of oil into Canada. So here's something else to be aware of. Last year, refiners in Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada imported more than 700,000 barrels of oil per day. It came from foreign countries. It came from pipe from the United States. It came from tankers around the world, from Saudi Arabia, from Angola, Nigeria. This is in large part because we have no direct pipeline capacity to move our abundant Western Canadian oil to Eastern Canadian consumers. Canada has the third largest reserve of oil in the world, and last year we spent, as a country, $17 billion to buy it from foreign countries. $17 billion. That 17 sounds familiar, doesn't it? It's exactly the same amount of money that our industry generates for governments across the country. So all the benefit that we generated got shipped overseas. There's something seriously wrong with this picture. It's something that we need to fix as a country, starting with new infrastructure. For Canadian oil, we need to invest in new pipeline infrastructure so that we can ultimately reach new customers in Asia, in Europe, and yes, even here at home within Canada. For Canadian natural gas, we need to develop a liquefied natural gas industry so that the tremendous resource we have can be actually shipped to other consumers who need it. And there's an opportunity for us to make greater use of natural gas here at home. With more infrastructure, Canadian oil and gas can reach more customers across North America and around the world. At the same time, we can grow, we can also get a better price for our product, and all Canadians benefit when we do that. So here in Canada, there's been a lot of talk among politicians recently about the need for public investment in infrastructure. Well, we already have a number of opportunities ahead of us, as the slide right here shows. There is $30 billion of private capital for shovel-ready infrastructure projects in this country. And I'm specifically referring to the Energy East pipeline, the Northern Gateway pipeline, and the Trans Mountain Expansion pipeline. In addition, there are several LNG projects and export facilities that have been proposed for the West Coast. They're just awaiting government approval. And finally, there are opportunities to use more clean-burning Canadian natural gas all across the country. Specifically here in Alberta, as we look to transition away from coal to natural gas as a potential backstop to supply electricity. Getting the green light on these infrastructure projects will be a tremendous stimulus to the Canadian economy. They come with no taxpayer cost. They give taxpayer benefits, not only during the construction phase of these projects, but as a stimulus and a catalyst for economic growth for decades. So we need to take urgent action on all these projects quickly. Without more pipelines, Canadian oil will sell at a discount. Prices will make us uncompetitive. And the growth and investment in jobs will not only be constrained, but will likely decline. Without LNG markets or more efforts to use Canadian natural gas at home, our country's natural gas industry will lose market share, production will suffer. And all of this will hurt us and our economies and our neighbors. So it's time to build the infrastructure needed to get Canadian oil and gas to more customers and more markets and generate more benefits for us at home. Now, certainly building more infrastructure is crucial, but it's not the only solution we need to think about when it comes to a strong energy future for Canada. In today's tough economic climate, we have another window to turn challenges into opportunities, and that is on how our oil and gas industry innovates to compete. Today, we're facing increased societal expectations. There's a desire to lessen our impact on the environment. Now, clearly, when oil and gas prices improve, it's imperative that we find new ways to extract the value from these resources and do so in a way that is cost-effective, but also lessens the impact on the environment. Now, the good news is this environmental leadership is already starting to take place in the oil sands, and it could become a long-term competitive advantage for Canada. Energy technology and innovation, in fact, could be Canada's greatest contribution to climate change. 4 years ago, 13 of Canada's largest oil sands companies came together to form the Canadian Oil Sands Innovation Alliance, or COSIA for short. Now, this is a unique partnership of companies that are committed to achieving ever higher standards of environmental performance in 4 key areas: our impact on land, our impact on water, our impact on tailings, and finally, our impact on greenhouse gases. And to do that, they've set aggressive targets. They're working with some of the top scientists around Canada and around the world. And they've put their money where their mouth is. This is an initiative that is voluntary of industry. And these are companies that have brought $1.3 billion of their own capital to support the development of more than 800 innovations and technologies. And the work they're doing is impressive. Imagine using satellite technology to monitor more accurately greenhouse gases from tailings ponds and mines from outer space. In Canada's oil sands, we can. Imperial Oil is set to launch later this year satellite technology to monitor greenhouse gases. Imagine making electricity from CO2, not making CO2 from electricity. In Canada's oil sands, we can. Cenovus is exploring molten carbonate fuel cells to capture carbon and produce clean electricity with almost no greenhouse gas emissions. Imagine taking CO2 and making a valuable economic product out of that. In Canada's oil sands, we can. The COSIA NRG $20 million X Prize is now underway. That is encouraging scientists and entrepreneurs around the world to find a way to take CO2 and make it a valuable product. Now, these and hundreds of other innovations are taking place right now in Canada's oil sands. This is breakthrough science at work. It's the future of the industry today. Now, that's only natural because with Canada's resources come resourcefulness. They come with a commitment to technology, to advanced thinking, to responsible development. It's just the Canadian way. So yes, our industry faces challenges, but with the right resourcefulness, we can overcome them so that when our economy does recover, our country's oil and gas industry is stronger and that we can compete, not only on cost, but on the environment too. That will be Canadian leadership. So in the last 15, 20 minutes or so, I've talked to you about some of the challenges facing our industry, and I've shared some ideas about how to build a stronger, more sustainable energy sector. Because it's important for all of us to have those discussions right now. Today, the need has never been greater for us as a country to have a thoughtful look at our energy opportunities and consider how our country can evolve to compete in a changing, dynamic, challenging world. Now here in Canada, we're in the midst of an energy debate. At times, our industry's energy projects have become a proxy for very polarizing debates. Some in this country think that we should keep our resources in the ground. Some think that we shut down all the oil sands, or that we should put up fracking bans, or tanker bans off the West Coast. Build the pipeline to the coast, but we're going to ban the tankers from taking it anywhere. Or that we should not build a single new pipeline in this country. We need to balance this debate with some hard economic realities. Namely, that we live in a growing global world that needs more energy. According to the independent International Energy Agency, world demand for energy is going to grow some 37% over the next 2 decades. Now, certainly our energy mix is going to change, and renewables will play a growing and increasingly important part of that mix. But make no mistake, the world will need more oil. The world will need more natural gas. And whom better to supply it than Canada? So Canada can play an incredible leading part in the world's future energy mix. We have what the world needs. As I've said before, our challenge is getting it there. We offer a reliable supply of energy that is produced safely and responsibly. We have not only the resources, but the know-how, the expertise, the resourcefulness that the world wants as well. So given this outlook, what kind of oil and gas future do we want as a country? And how do we want to compete on the world stage? There's so much we can do to achieve our country's energy potential. Imagine a world where we actually get full value for our oil and natural gas. Or a world where we have more than one customer, where our product competes not only on cost, but on environmental leadership, where we export not only our resources, but our knowledge and resourcefulness, and where we can develop our incredible resources to the full potential and benefit of all Canadians. We can do this. But this will take commitment, leadership, and will, if it's to happen. It is ultimately a choice for us as Canadians. So in the years ahead, if Canada's oil and gas industry is to attract more investment, is to protect jobs, grow our economies, and the prosperity of our people, it will require bold commitment and leadership from political leaders and from all of us as citizens. If we all pull together, we can create a strong, sustainable oil and gas industry that develops our resources responsibly and sells it to the world. In doing so, we ensure a strong economic future for our citizens. So, how do we get started? If this energy future is important to all of us, then it's time to start talking about it with each other, with our coworkers, our business partners, our friends, our families, our neighbors, and our country's political leaders. We have the opportunity for a very bright future, but it requires will and action to make it happen. So let's build it together. Join me, start a conversation. Thank you.